welcome back. Today I am really excited to have Caroline Lunny on the podcast. She's one of my best friends from The Bachelor. I think we cut part of this, but the first part of our conversation was just us gushing about our very brief Bachelor in Paradise appearance where we were each other's rock and basically entire experience because we were locked on a porch together. But the episode is on fertility and fertility issues. Many of you may know that Caroline is struggling with fertility and undergoing many egg freezing rounds. And she's been really vocal about this because she's trying to help other people get informed about their fertility. So we talk about, what it can be like to hear that news. But we also talk a lot about a lot of other things. How to address fertility issues. We talk a lot about egg freezing. We talk about the mental health issues that can come along with this news. But we also talk about relationships because she was in an absolutely horrific relationship at the time, and thinking about motherhood prompted her to leave that relationship. And so we talk a lot about what it's like to suddenly be thinking about fertility and motherhood and what that means about the partners we choose or the partners we are with. So I hope you enjoy it. I love this conversation, and here we go. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. So today we're talking about something that I hear about with increasing frequency now that I am almost 30 and we're kind of going into this brand new life stage. And the topic is fertility. A lot of us are finding out more about our fertility. We're trying to get pregnant, and that can bring a lot of joy and a lot of heartache. And it can cause people to totally reevaluate their life plan and their family plan. And so joining us today is my dear friend from my season of The Bachelor, Caroline Lunny. She's been really outspoken about fertility recently and her issues with fertility. And I just think she's been an amazing advocate for this. And really, an honest, somehow a ray of sunshine, even though I think she's going to talk some about what's been really difficult through this. But really connecting with people about this. And we're just really glad to have her voice on our podcast. So hello, welcome, Caroline.
Hi. And you also forgot our brief stint in Bachelor in Paradise, where it was just me and you against the world. We hated the whole thing and we just weren't into anybody. We wanted no part of it. But you were like my saving grace in Paradise. And yeah, I'm so grateful that I had you there.
I love whenever this happens so often, but I'll go on people's podcasts and they're like, Jacqueline Trumbull from The Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise, kind of, hee. And I'm like, what? Can we just leave that out?
I'm stint that we were there. We both were like, why are we here? This is not what we signed up for. I didn't know anything about the show, because I had actually never watched Paradise before. And so walking through this whole jungle of shit, and there's all these different paths, and you're like, where is everybody? I'm like, I don't know who's here. And I just think I wasn't really mentally prepared for what I was walking into. And everyone already it felt very cliquey when I got there. And I just was well, I feel stupid. And then it just led to me feeling super uncomfortable and had this major imposter syndrome, social anxiety. And I just totally put my foot in my mouth and I was super awkward. And I don't know, I was so embarrassed. I think I had hives. It was just not, it was just not awful. I just I want to go home. So that was cool. But Bachelor in Paradise, good times.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I'm such an extrovert, but I definitely get nervous and have social anxiety. So it's definitely an introverted piece to me that I've learned. And it's also weird with this whole pandemic thing. I'm just getting really comfortable being alone. Mm-hmm. And also I had just gone through a pretty horrendous breakup last fall.
Oh my God, me too.
And yeah, I'm so sorry to hear that. But it's funny because I feel having gone through that, I've just learned to love being alone so much because it was so miserable, the relationship that I was in. Mm. And he was just so awful that every time he'd pull in the driveway, I would tense up. And it was just so nice to finally be alone after I left him. I was this is amazing. And now I never want to see anyone ever.
Wow. How long were you with this person?
Longer than I should have been. I was with him for a little over a year. Mm-hmm. But when we met, I was in a really like bad place with my depression and anxiety and having like the worst depression and anxiety that I'd had in years, and having like panic attacks regularly, and like hurting myself and like all of these like awful things. And then he kind of came in, and it just kind of is very fitting for like now that I'm on the other side of it, to see like how he is kind of like an emotionally abusive person who like found me when I was at my most vulnerable. And he came in and was super manipulative and just incredibly toxic and just bad guy. Overall, bad guy. Yeah. So
yeah, you got out of that.
We were together for like a year, little over a year. Yeah.
I remember meeting you at the beginning of that year, and it was like, I found the one. He's so incredible. So, I mean, he did the love bombing shit in the beginning.
Oh my God, yes. And it's so funny. I laugh about it now because it's like, oh my God, why did you think that was it? And it's because I was in such a bad place. And then this person comes in and love bombs you. And I didn't know what love bombing was. I just was like, oh my gosh, this is like a fairy tale. And this person is saying all the things I've ever wanted anyone to say. And then it was just like later on, and like the words didn't match the actions. And it took me a while to, I think when you kind of meet someone and they tell you who they are rather than showing you, you kind of like fall in love with the idea of this person in your head. And then it almost is hard to like come to the reality that person isn't the person who you think that they are. And you're like fighting for this person to be the person that they said that they are, but they're just not that person.
This really actually relates to the topic today, because when you got your AMH levels, your modern fertility results, and you did your first round of egg freezing, was when you decided to leave him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's funny, actually, I had found out in February 2020 that I had just seen the modern fertility test, and I was, every person who like has an Instagram thing, like I feel like a lot of people, like influencers, do the modern fertility ad. And I remember I'd wanted to do it, and I reached out to our agent and I was like, hey, like I want to do that. And he's like, oh, they're only looking for serious couples and you're like not married. And I was like, oh, okay. But there was this weird thing pulling me to take the test. And so I purchased it on my own. I used Crystal's code. I was like, yeah, just going to use that to save myself $50 or whatever. And so I paid for it on my own. And I found out so John and I actually had broken up. And in February of 2020. And then I found all this out. And then the pandemic happened. And it was really confusing. And I think I just was scared. And I was feeling really alone with my fertility stuff. And he came in and was like very, helpful and supportive with that. And then the pandemic's happening. And I think I just felt like this panic come over me. So I like jumped back into this relationship with this person that I never should have been with in the first place, let alone getting back together with him. And so that happens. And he was he was really, supportive in the whole idea of the whole fertility thing and whatever. But then after my first egg retrieval, it's weird how it happens. You get this like maternal energy that comes over you. And I value, the idea of being a mom so much. And for me, it was like having this little egg. It wasn't even fertilized or anything. It was just like my precious little egg that I worked so hard for. It like, I had this like mama bear instinct that came over me. And I was like, I couldn't let him near my egg. Like I didn't want him to be the father. My kid deserves better than that guy as a dad. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I couldn't leave for myself, but I could leave for my kid. And it's funny how we do that where, we put ourselves through so much shit and we put ourselves through so much heartbreak and all these hard things because we're just like in it and we're like, oh, like whatever, like we'll just keep fighting through it. And you almost like you can stand up for your best friend better than you can stand up for yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like I could tell my friend to all of the things to get out of the relationship and say, this is a red flag. That's a red flag. But in my thing, I'm like, oh, it's like whatever. And yeah, so I just stayed for so much stupid stuff that I shouldn't have stayed for. But for my for my hypothetical future child, I was like, you deserve better than this.
Caroline, this is so funny that you say this because I had a very similar experience, and I went through IVF, got embryos with my partner, and I had a gut feeling as soon as, I was about to, we're going to move forward. I had a gut feeling of like, just as you're saying, I was like, I can take on a lot of stuff. But to start evaluate that person as like, this is going to be my co-parent. This is going to be the father of my children.
Totally.
That's going to, like I have higher standards for that or different standards. And it is this kind of like instinct, this kind of shift in, we're talking about like, asserting yourself or self-care and something, but no, you suddenly become like a mother. Totally. And which is strange because it's during fertility issues and, but like the idea of becoming a mother starts even before the baby's here.
1,000%. And it's funny because the one thing that's been so cool about, my platform and everything, and I really truly believe that I went on the show because of my fertility stuff. I just feel like everything lined up the way that like I had to go on The Bachelor to like see all these modern fertility tests and want to take them. And then I wouldn't have met the doctor that I'm using if it wasn't for, Instagram and things like that. And then the platform that I've been able to have with these women and kind of share these stories. It's been really cool. And I'm having a brain fart. I had a better point that I was getting to over this.
Motherhood, maybe starting the motherhood.
No, it's gone. There's the ADD that kicks in and you're just like, okay, I'll come back. But yeah. I had a point. I don't remember what it is.
It'll come back. I'm curious. So, especially for the people listening who might not be familiar with, like, what is AMH? What are tests? Like, what is, like, how do you know you're fertile? Can you describe a little bit of like the initial results and how you felt at that time? And
well, the thing is people are starting to talk about it more, I don't know if I just like wasn't involved in this world and I didn't know anything before and now I'm in it. So now I'm hearing a lot more about it, but it's not something that's talked about enough. And it's funny how when I first spoke about it, how it felt so scary to share because I felt so like damaged. I felt so like broken as a woman. And this whole thing that I have been dying to do my entire life was in jeopardy. And it was really scary to me. And then the second I shared that, all of these women came out of the woodwork and all people who are my great friends have been going through this and like didn't tell me, didn't talk about it, have been doing it for years, had multiple miscarriages, have, not been able to get pregnant, have been having all these issues and things like that. And it's so funny how many women are going through this silently. So I think it's just so important that, obviously each person has to, do what's right for them. And, it's a lot to share, but I think it felt like my responsibility to share this with women, to get people thinking about it because it is so common. And it like blew my mind to have so many women reach out to me and say, me too. Like I've got this fertility issue. I have low eggs and AMH. So, when I did the test, so you do the modern fertility blood test and you like prick your finger, you bleed on a little piece of paper and then you mail it in, super easy. And then, you get your test results back and it's cool because modern fertility really breaks it down for you and makes it super accessible and super easy to, just figure it out because it's so hard to get your doctor to actually help you and to listen to you and to think that at 29 years old, there's something wrong with you. And if I didn't have the modern fertility test to go, hey, look, something's off, then like my doctor, because she was like, you're fine. You're 29. You just turned 29. Nothing's wrong with you. Like you're being dramatic. You're being a hypochondriac. You saw that on Instagram. That's stupid. And so if I hadn't had the cold hard facts with my actual numbers, it would have been really hard to, have a ground to stand on and say, hey, no, please look into this for me. And because a lot of doctors are just generalizing like, oh, you're young, you're fine. You have to be, if you're under 35 years old, you have to be trying and failing for a year before they'll test you. If you're over 35, you have to be trying and failing for 6 months. why aren't we testing this every year at our pap smear? Like, we value pap smears so much, but we don't value our fertility health. Why is that? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why is that a test that we're running for, like, whatever? I mean, it's a lot more than just sexually transmitted diseases, I'm sure, but like, they're doing your pap smear every year and they value that, but they don't value something that, could potentially save you a lot of heartbreak and money.
It's a good point. And especially, so I'm turning 30 in like 2 weeks. And so, yeah, almost our reunion, Caroline. But
yes.
I know so many women in their early 30s and late 20s who are, and it's funny because I didn't anticipate on talking about John, but I think this is actually a really important part of this whole puzzle, because what I'm finding is happening is a lot of women are with partners right now, and maybe they're not sure about the fit, or they're not sure if this is the one, or maybe they're being actively mistreated like you were. And they're like, should I just settle on this partner? Should I stay with this person? Because I'm afraid of fertility.
Settle. You should never, ever settle. Just
yeah.
No.
Well, I've been trying to peddle modern fertility to people because it's like, you have actually some control over this. Like, you can get a better look into your timeline. And if we were testing people starting at age 20 or whatever, it's like we'd have so much runway to know what we're working with.
I wish I knew earlier. If I knew what I know now at 25, and if I had frozen eggs when I was 25, I'd go through a lot less surgeries. I'd have a lot more, it costs money to, like, there's a storage fee for my eggs to keep them, cold for, there's like a monthly fee, whatever, but it's worth it. Like, I mean, the money you spend per surgery the surgeries vary from anywhere from like $7,000 to $15,000, depending on like what kind of medications you need. And so I've had 4 surgeries. Like, that's a lot of fucking money that I could have maybe, and I only have 7 eggs. I don't like to say only, because I think my mindset has been like you have to be really glass half full here to not completely lose it in this whole process. So I really tried to shift my perspective to being super positive. So I have a whole 7 eggs and it's awesome. So, but I mean, after 4 surgeries, ideally I would like to have more than 7. And sure, I'm grateful to have those 7, but what would that number have looked like if after 1 surgery when I was 25? You know what I mean? Like, and they're like, hey, like, your numbers are looking pretty low. Like, we should just, as a precautionary measure, like, just freeze your eggs now. And, it would have just been a lot less invasive on my body and wallet.
Yeah, I remember when I started this, I was like, we've been told from a young age that if we just like think about sex, we're going to get pregnant. So we've been on this birth control, or, we fight our entire lives to prevent it. Yeah. And then and they say, oh, take your time, like, get your career going. And then by the time sometimes we get there, it's like, wait, I didn't know that this would be so hard. Or I don't know how you felt, Caroline, but I definitely remember feeling like that false sense of security of that I will meet the partner, we would just be in love and have a glass of wine and suddenly get pregnant. Mm-hmm. That whole like vision of this standard way of making a family was very torn away. Yeah. Did you feel that way too, or?
Yeah, I mean, because it's just like, hey, like, oh, you look at a dick and you get pregnant. What is your love? It's like Mean Girls, like, you will get pregnant and you will die. It's just like, that's how it's always been. We've been trying to prevent pregnancy, like you said, like, we've been actively trying and avoiding it, but we don't really talk about, hey, like, why are we trying so hard to avoid this when, I mean, like, I get it. We're not ready for kids. I get that piece. But rather than like looking into this, like, we don't look into it at all. And I just think that that's kind of asinine. Like, why aren't we talking about that? And I hope that we can just continue to educate women just to like, hey, look into it. Like, what harm is that going to do? Like, $250 or whatever the hell it costs. What is it? How much is the modern fertility test? Like $150?
I can't
know. Yeah.
It's somewhere around there. But like, honestly, you spend that on a night out of drinks. Like, you know what I mean? Like, just look into it.
I think it's like 120. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it's very doable. And also the thing is, And so, yes, I love modern fertility because it makes it so easy. They ship it to your house. You don't even have to leave your house. Like they ship it to your house. You just prick your finger, bleed, mail it back in. But if that's not something that works for you, you can also ask your doctor to run the test through your health insurance. But a lot of doctors are saying, we're not going to run that test because you're under 35. You're not even married. You're not even having sex. Like, we don't need to run that test for you. And it's like, just because I'm not having sex right now does not mean that we don't have to run that test. Like, I want to know what's going on with my body. So if you ask your doctor and really advocate for yourself, they should do it. And someone told me that if your doctor says no, you have to just say, hey, put down in my chart that you are refusing to do this for me. And I got into actually not like a screaming match, but like I got loud with my gynecologist because she made some kind of annoying remarks, and she thought Dr. Amy was trying to rip me off. And she was like, this doctor is taking advantage of you. She's like, you'll never get any eggs. And I was like, hey, listen, like, I know you guys don't believe in me. You've never believed in me. You didn't want to test me. You told me I was fine. And now I'm like too late. And it's just been like a whole shit show with things. And I don't know. I yelled at her. I was like, I know you don't believe in me, but like somebody does. So just like run the fucking test for me. And I'll take the test results somewhere else. Like, because I don't know. It's frustrating. I've had such a battle with my doctors, but.
Can you tell us a little bit about the different, like what is AMH, or what else did you learn about fertility through this process? Because I'm sure some people listening are like, what is going on? Like, what are these tests? What can I find out? What are potential problems? Like anything that it's like
So the main thing for me was my AMH was low. And so my AMH came back at 0.3 initially. In a healthy woman, so AMH means anti-Müllerian hormone or something like that. And it's a hormone that's indicative of like your egg count kind of. So when that hormone's low, it means, hey, like, I think we think you might be low on the eggs over here. So typical number, I believe, is between like 2.5 and like 5 or something is like a standard like range for women our age. And then so 1.0 is considered low. So when mine came back at 0.3, obviously I hopped on Google and I was like, what does this mean? And it's the level of someone who is like premenopausal. And I'm like freshly 29 years old at the time. And I was like, that's not what I was hoping for. So there's the AMH levels, but there's also so many different levels and things that can, affect your fertility. And so there's, maybe your hormone levels, your AMH levels are low, but you could have the PCOS, and like your estrogen levels are high. And like, it's a really has to be a beautiful, like kind of marriage of all your numbers to get somewhere. And it's, again, not as simple as, hey, you have a glass of wine and have sex and there you go, you're pregnant. And there's just a lot of things that can go wrong. And if something's like a little bit out of whack, it can throw everything off.
Mm-hmm. Kibby, do you want to talk about your experience with it?
I mean, yeah, I had the weird experience of trying for, in total, it was like 2 years. And all my levels and things seemed like fine on the surface. Like I went to a doctor, I took modern fertility, went to the doctor, and everything was fine. And still we were not able to get pregnant. And, so it is.
It's sperm.
Everything was fine.
So,
everything was fine. So it's, I don't mean to scare the people listening, but it's like, you never know. I actually kind of wish that I got a number or like some test or something that was like, okay, your uterus or your egg, something, but everyone was like, I don't know, just keep trying.
It could be your uterine lining. It could be this, it could be that. There's all these different things. And it's so hard to kind of figure it out. So wait, so are you with that guy still?
I'm not, because we broke, like as soon as I was going to get the embryo transfer, I had the gut feeling that I can't do this. And I think that's also a weird part about this whole thing is, I don't know your experience, but at least like with trying, there was all these messages of things that you can do, like don't drink as much caffeine or do this or do that. And
I
don't think
Stress, Kibby.
don't stress. It's like, oh, come on.
Yeah.
But then it's also like that there's like a miracle of life, and there might be something else like going on in terms of like becoming a mother that's beyond like what I eat or drink. And so I don't know how you felt, but this balance of like, what am I in control of? I don't know.
Well, and I think that was a thing for me for so long with like people like hate the shots. I love them. I love all of the hormone shots. Like all of the vitamins, like, and I've laxed up a little bit. Like I've switched over all my cleaning products in my house. Like I switched over all of my makeup. I use non-toxic makeup, non-toxic cleaning products, non-toxic shampoo. Like, and it's this thing for me where it all does feel so out of my control. And so it's like, for me, I loved the shots because it was like the one thing I could control. And it was like, it felt like something that I could do that was being proactive for myself.
I get that.
And like, I love the pain. I love being bloated. I love all of the, like the downtime and like the pampering my body, because it just feels like it's the one thing I can control. And it's weird. It's all hard. And it's funny how your brain works in times like this, but yeah. But
Can you tell a little bit? Cause I'm sure people listening are like, oh God, okay. Now egg freezing, like what did that even entail? Yeah. You did it 4 times. Can you walk us through like the basic, what happens? Like, what do you do? What is it like?
Yeah. So, I love it, and I love all of it. And it's funny because, so I had initially gone to a different doctor. That was like a local doctor in Boston, and someone had just been like, hey, like, that's where, so-and-so went, you should check that out. So I went and I checked out this place. And when we first started everything, I was still very new at all this. I was very sad. I was very scared. I was very overwhelmed. And so we, go in for my ultrasound and everything. And then, so there's only like 3 follicles or whatever at the time. And so they were like, yeah, so follicles are, when you look at your ovary, there's these little like black little spots. It looks like a chocolate chip cookie. And so each spot is a follicle, and in each follicle is an egg. And so when you go through all the hormones and stimulation, it allows a lot of eggs to grow and to kind of be ready to be harvested. The first doctor was like, yeah, if you have under 5 follicles, we won't even, we don't operate for under 5. And I was like, oh, like, okay, like I'll just, work really hard and get my numbers up next month. And it's funny because now that was when I was, my first ever visit. I was like, oh, next month it'll be better. I've done this multiple times. I have never had over 3. Like I have never, let alone over 5. So luckily I found Dr. Amy, who is on Instagram as the Egg Whisperer, or just at Egg Whisperer. And she doesn't care that we're under 5. And she just is like, hey, we're going to go for it. And we go for it every time. And I'm so grateful that someone on Instagram recommended her to me, because my story would look a lot different if I didn't have Dr. Amy. I wouldn't have any eggs frozen, because it wouldn't have been worth it to go in and get them. And I'm just grateful that she thought it would be worth it, because I don't know what it would look like if I didn't have her. So I don't know. It's scary to think about. How's your experience been with Dr. Amy?
I think we're due in August, I think.
August?
Yeah, but we haven't been in touch in a while. But are you
I'm doing it with you. We're gonna synchronize our vaginas, and we're gonna go in together.
Yay! I was hoping we were doing it at the same time. Okay,
she was like, "I'm gonna have you come out when Jackie's here, so we'll do it together." So I'm excited. So
do we get to hang out in the hotel room together for 2 weeks?
Yeah. I'm not gonna have you wait across the hall. So it's cool because I did it with Becca too, because Becca went to Dr. Amy. She's become the official fertility doctor of Bachelor Nation, basically. And it's cool. So I know, so Sarah Heron, I think that's how you say her last name.
Yeah.
Sean's season, she has diminished ovarian reserve as well. And so basically she has a low egg count as well. And so she's going in, I think, next week for her retrieval.
Nice.
So she's another ally in this whole fertility world. It's just nice to have somebody else to kind of talk to about it all. So
yeah,
she's been great.
Has this I mean, that first, what was the mental roller coaster of this? Like that first moment you get this test, that first week, and how, I mean, and I know you've said you're prone to anxiety and depression. So what was this like for you?
It's funny because considering how I know I have depression and anxiety, I actually did really well with that piece of it. I was not depressed. Like, you know how people just like to throw around the word like, oh, I was depressed. It's like, I wasn't depressed because I actually have been depressed and I know what that feels like. This wasn't that. I was just obviously extremely sad. And like I think it was just hard because in the beginning, you don't know what it means. And you're only relying on what Google is telling you at this point. And it like takes a minute for a doctor to get back to you. And it's like the longest 2-week wait to your like next appointment. And, you know, the doctors don't really take you seriously. So they're not like rushing you in or whatever. But so once I got over kind of the initial shock of all of it, and it was awful. Like I didn't get out of bed for 3 days. Like I just was like, I couldn't wrap my brain around it. And I was grieving this family that I had envisioned my whole life. Like I lost my children. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's funny because it's like, when we talked about this, how you have this maternal energy that just comes over you, and it's different. I think so many women who don't even have kids yet are truly mothers. And like, I know that I'm a mother. Like, that's just like part of who I am as a person. And my kids aren't here yet, but like you have this like insane love within you. And when someone, you know, says, hey, you'll never have kids, and like what that feels like, it feels like, you know, you're losing a child. And obviously I've never had a child that I've lost. So I don't know that pain. And I'm sure it's completely different, but also the idea of it is similar. You know, I don't want to say, you know, hey, like it's the same thing as losing a child, but yeah, and that's just how it felt to me. But anyway, but it was wild. So after, you know, the initial shock and sadness, and you kind of get a plan in place, last year was rock bottom for me. 2020, pandemic aside, was a shithole year for me. And it was cool because I found this strength that I had no idea that I had. And it's like, it's that mama bear strength. And I was like, I have to keep going. I have to keep putting one foot in front of the other for my kids. And it was just like this thing, like I didn't get to be sad. I didn't get to be depressed. I had to keep going. And it was really cool to find that strength within yourself, that it's just when it's a strength that you're not familiar with or used to having. But yeah, it's just, it's cool to see what maternal energy is capable of.
I really appreciate you talking about that grief, because I was just telling Jacqueline, I work at a women's clinic now, and with people struggling with postpartum depression and fertility, and grief is such a huge part of it, but it's not as obvious as like losing someone in, you know, like a death in the family or something. But it is this grief that like women who suffer from miscarriages or not being able to get pregnant, or even just like the dream of a family, there's that such a loss. And if we don't talk about it, it feels like this thing that is only real in us, right? Like, oh, we're grieving a child that is not even here in this, you know, this realm yet or whatever, but it's real. It's a real pain.
Real. You feel, and that's the thing that I don't like about, and obviously to each his own, but I don't like this thing where it's like, hey, wait till your second trimester to tell anyone you're pregnant in case you lose a pregnancy. It's like, bitch, if my goldfish died, I'm going to tell my coworker like, oh, my goldfish died today. I'll be like, oh, I'm so sorry. But like, I lost a pregnancy and I'm not going to tell, like, you're not going to like,
yeah.
And not like you like need everyone to like, you know, pity you or whatever, but you get off. You're mentally not there. You know what I mean? Like that's something that would throw you off. That is something that would drastically affect, you know, the way you're working or something like that. You know what I mean? It's going to affect you, and to just act like everything's fine and just be suffering silently is just, it just feels so mean. It just feels so mean that we're encouraging women to just shut up and just suffer silently. And that just feels so wrong when I know people would want to, like, you know, comfort you or, you know, have a little slack if your dog died that, you know, that day and you knew, you know what I mean? Like, but why for your unborn child are you supposed to just suck it up? That just feels so wrong to me. So I hope that I love, so actually Spivey just lost another baby, which is so sad.
Another?
Did you see that? So she got pregnant again and she lost the baby again. So she lost CJ last year when the cord was tied around his neck.
Oh, gosh.
And then so she got pregnant again and she lost this baby. It just like the heart stopped beating and just genetic abnormalities or something, she said. And my heart just breaks for her. And she's just such a wonderful person. I like really appreciate like the feminist that she is. And like, I totally have bonded with her before all the fertility stuff. But I love that with this most recent pregnancy, rather than being scarred and jaded by, you know, because she lost a baby at like around 7 months, I think. So CJ has the cord tied around his neck at 7 months. And prior to that, they did IVF and did a transfer with that. And she was pregnant and lost that baby too. So this was her third loss that I'm aware of. But I love that when she first found out, she told everybody right away. And she said, I want to enjoy this. And she said, I don't want to be sad about this. So, and then it sucks because she did lose the baby. But it was just, I don't know, there's something so special about celebrating it, even though it's only here for a brief moment. And then like, you know, kind of grieving with her. And like, you know, I don't know. It's just, I think it's so beautiful just to honor it as it is and not hide it for weeks and on end and suffer silently. I just think that there's so much like beauty in that raw vulnerability.
Yeah, because it's real to the mother, right? Like as soon as she gets pregnant, you know, it felt real to me even when I never got pregnant. Even just the dream of, okay, we tried, and then there's a couple weeks where I'm hoping, and I couldn't help but just picturing what this child could look like or what I'd be as a mother. And then, you know, it doesn't work out and you feel this grief, and it was real for us, right? And to not be able to share it, that's even worse, right? It makes it seem like it's a shameful private thing when, you know, it's a loss like anything else.
And I think that's such a good point to make. It just puts so much shame, I feel like, on the mother. Like, you know, when you have to suffer silently and don't want anyone to know. And it just kind of like reiterates the fact that like, you couldn't do it. Like, don't tell anyone that you're like, you can't do it. And it's just like, it's not like she did anything wrong. It happens. Like,
that's the piece that can be really hard with mental health and, you know, working with patients like this and remembering my own experience. It's, you know, it's something else, you know, it could be luck, you know, it's nature or whatever, but you can't help but feel like it's your fault or there's something wrong with you, right? It's actually, you know, it's on the mother, not necessarily the father, right? It's like, oh, I must have been stressed out. I must have eaten the wrong thing. I must have moved in a way that was wrong. I didn't do the right thing, right? There's some, like, I'm sure even mothers, you know, with their child in front of them feel this kind of shame or that responsibility for how the kid is doing and feeling. But the idea that we're fully responsible for such a loss, it's devastating.
Yeah, it's just, it's all a lot. And there's just so much put on women. And I just wish there was a way to change that. So I'm hoping just that we keep like, you know, continuing the dialogue. And I think just having other women hearing the stories and other women, like, you know, hearing the stories of loss and things like that just really helps someone to not feel I think that that's such a huge piece of it, is just not feeling alone in all of this. Cause it's very isolating and it just sucks. It's all shitty. So it's just nice to kind of pull together as women and get through it. And there's no rules or whatever. It's just, I don't know, just figuring it out as you go.
Caroline, I love how you also have all these women who have reached out to you. So you've got some insight into the experience of others. I saw also a post of yours where you said, I can't wait to adopt someday. Have you had to re-envision your future, and what's that been like for you?
I've always wanted to adopt. And obviously, you know, I just, whatever way like my situation pans out, I think like one of the big things with, especially with going through infertility stuff, is kind of just like releasing this idea and this sense of wanting to control the whole situation. Because at the end of the day, like the goal is I want to be a mom. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, motherhood looks different to so many people, but I've always wanted to adopt. And it was because of this one video that I saw where everybody wants a baby. Do you know what I mean? Like, so babies are getting adopted and all the time. I feel like that's like a hot commodity. Everyone wants the new fresh baby. But there are so many children who are in the system and who are, you know, dying for a family. And there are so many of us who are dying to be mothers. It's like, it's just something to consider. It's like, hey, you know what? Like, yes, there will be, you know, it is a little harder to adopt an older child because they've probably gone through some trauma. Mm-hmm. But I think like for how I feel like I have so much like maternal love to give. Like, why wouldn't I want to share that with somebody and like protect them and keep them safe? And I don't know. And I just think my idea of family is just so, I just kind of collect people as I go kind of thing. Like, you don't have to be a blood relative to be like my family. And I've adopted because I don't have a relationship with my dad whatsoever. Mm-hmm. That was a huge piece of my whole breakup with my ex. In that piece, because they were very, you know how they say you date your dad? Did that. John was my dad. So, but yeah, it's cool to like collect these little family members along the way, and it doesn't have to be a blood relative. So I just think like, why wouldn't you want to adopt someone who needs a family? Like you want kids, they need parents. Like, just seems like a good fit. So I know it's not necessarily that simple, but I just think it's something that a lot of people should keep their mind open to.
Yeah, it's interesting, like going on this journey and how mothers or people have been talking about how it felt like their children found them. That's a common thing that people are saying that I'd never heard before. Started trying, but they're like, your babies find you, and whether that's through biological children or, through a fertility treatment or adoption or whatever, often mothers feel like this was my baby. They came to me in this way and they chose me. So that makes me actually feel really relieved, because there's so much that we're like, I have to take the test, I have to do the egg retrieval, I have to do this perfectly. But it's actually like,
one of the biggest things I've learned within this process is just surrendering. Mm-hmm. I think like there's such like that word can be so attached to like spirituality and faith. And I just really have found that to be such a helpful word through all of this, just kind of like a strong like anchor, just like, hey, surrender. And it's like, the goal is just, you want to be a mom. It's like, so let go of all of the shit that goes like that you had like planned out in your head, and just like, if that's really what your heart like wants, figure it out.
Yeah.
And so like, I also understand like wanting to carry a child. Then I also understand like wanting to have your own biological child. Like, I'm freezing my eggs. And so I've got like multiple plans in place here because I want kids. So for me, I, would love to meet a guy, first of all. That would be so nice to meet a good one. That would be so great. Like a good dad. It's like, it's weird to like go through this and now like dating and like looking at qualities in people. I'm like, but, but so like for me, I have, I'm freezing my own eggs. And then we also did, my sister froze her eggs. And so if for some reason I run out of eggs and doesn't work for me, I can use my sister's eggs as my donor eggs, because I reserve the right to want to experience, pregnancy. Like, I want that. I want to know what that feels like. That's just something that like, I would love, to get to experience, and what a privilege it would be. But so there's, my eggs, my sister's eggs, adoption, whatever. Like I'm down for whatever, however we get there, we'll figure it out. But what about you guys? Have you ever thought about adopting, or like, where are you guys with all of this?
I mean, I haven't. But I think that's one of the things that I've struggled throughout my life, is not being very good at surrendering. And having a kind of holding tightly to an image of my future. And I've found that every time I am able to surrender a little bit, it is incredibly gratifying. And so I love that you were talking about that idea, especially paired with Kibby saying, like, your kids find you, this idea that the future will unfold. And, you know, the more open you are to these different forms of love, to adoption, or to, you know, your sister's donor eggs, or to any kind of openness, then you're going to wind up with a life with a ton of love in it, and one that you probably won't regret. So I don't know. I really like that bit about just being open, and
it's so much easier said than done, but but I think like if you, and it applies to honestly every area of your life, not just fertility. Like I feel like any time that I have been like wanting something to work and like kind of forcing it, and then I have this like moment where I go, you kind of throw your hands up and you're just like, I don't know what to do. It's kind of like this like Jesus take the wheel moment. And I feel like every time that I do surrender, something even more amazing shows up. And it's like you're fighting so hard for this one thing to be this one specific way. But actually something so amazing is just over here if you just lighten the fuck up. And I think it's just cool to like kind of remember that whenever you are struggling. And like I said, easier said than done. But
I just remember I also like my plans. I like things to go a certain way. And with like career and stuff, you can, right? To a degree, you can kind of, you know, of course there's twists and turns, but to most of my life up to this point has been like, okay, it's mostly worked out if I really worked hard at it. Like if I put my efforts into something.
We live in this world where everything's just like anything you want is a click away. And so when you find something where you're like, hey, why can't I just click that and it's here? And Amazon primed it tomorrow.
Amazon Prime it, baby.
What the fuck?
I do remember that I go through stages, and I'm probably still going to go through this, where when we were trying, I couldn't even imagine doing fertility treatments. I couldn't even imagine that I had issues. I was like, oh, I'm healthy, you know, young enough, whatever. And then each stage is a new reality of like, oh, wait, something is wrong. Oh, wait, I'm going to have to do this, fertility treatment. Oh, wait, that's not working. I have to do IVF, right? And in each part, I was like, okay, at least this is what can happen. But I've had to open up to like new realities of like, okay, I don't know. Maybe one day I'm going to have a surrogate or adopt or donor egg or donor sperm or whatever. Like, I don't know. And that's really scary, but I mean, I think that mothers always say, or parents always say, that kids teach you that you can't plan for anything, right? That you have like plans on when to leave the house or what the kids are going to learn or do. And it's all out the window, right? So it's like lessons in the surrendering, as you said.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. And I think that there's so much like beautiful reflection that can happen here. And it's like, the big thing that has been so great for me is rather than turning to like, why me, poor me, I kind of had to force myself to like look into like law of attraction and spirituality and abundance and just like glass half full shit. And you're like, it feels like, you know, you don't want to have this like toxic positivity, but also there's this thing where you kind of have to just be optimistic, because you will go like completely depressed and it can be absolutely awful. So you have to like kind of like try and take something away from it and try and just, you know, learn the lessons and go, oh, you know what, I just have to surrender. Like, yeah. And you know, it doesn't happen for everyone the way that you want it to, but I don't know, hopefully there's something you all take from it.
Have you, I know we probably should start thinking about wrapping up, but as usual, I have more questions. So, we've been talking a lot about egg freezing, and that does give us so much of a level of control, but there are so many women out there who can't afford egg freezing. And I just wonder, like, for those women that you've talked to, have you gotten a different message from them? I mean, are they having a much different experience? And Kibby, to you too, like what for instance, one thing that we're talking about is like, leave that man. The guy isn't a good father, then get out of there. But it's like, well, what if you only have 6 months left of fertility or a year left of fertility and you've got this partner? It's like, what then?
I don't recommend ever staying with somebody because you've only got 6 months left. I truly believe that you have to, like, there are things like that you have to pay attention to. And I grew up with a dad who was a terrible person. And like, he never like hit us or anything, but he was incredibly narcissistic, emotionally abusive, had incredible anger management problems and all of these things. And it's like, my mom never should have gotten as far as she did, because all of those signs were there and she overlooked it. And if something isn't right, don't rush that because, you only have 6 months. Like, don't put yourself in that position where you're trapped with somebody for the next 18 years or whatever, because, you're scared. Like, you are so much stronger than we all are so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for. Like, do you know what I mean? And so, we think, we need this person or we need this situation to all be like, again, it comes back to us trying to control it all. It's like, if something isn't right, and like, I think something I've been really working on with, within the breakup and within my rock bottom year last year, is just kind of trusting my gut and my intuition. And there's so much power within that. And if you can like actually, just believe it, like, like trust and like, hey, like that feels wrong, listen to that. And it's like, so, it's hard because like, we were saying, a lot of women can't afford it. But there are some health insurances that will cover some basic kind of level stuff. So talk to your insurance companies to see what you're able to do with that. So I'm currently in the process of trying to start I want to kind of pay my good fortune forward here almost. So I'm trying to figure out how, if somebody is listening to this and knows how to start a charity and whatnot, I would love your help. But I want to start something where I create a foundation that helps women afford egg freezing and IVF, because it's hard. It's hard to go through this. And luckily I'm able to, afford this whole experience, but it's not the case for everyone. And it's already hard enough as it is, let alone adding a financial burden of it all. But yes, if anyone knows how to start a foundation, let your girl know.
I think that's an awesome idea.
That would be great. And I think there's some out there, and there's some fertility clinics that have like payment plans or some kind of financial assistance. So I guess, the looking around and doing research, and, it's basically like the reproductive clinics. There's some that are attached to a hospital and some are independent, and there are some options, but that would be great to have more, right? Just to support women in this situation who are mothers without their babies yet. So.
And I think the biggest thing that I can say here is don't take no for an answer. And so I've had so many people tell me no, and for some reason I kept going. I don't know. I didn't even really think about it. I just kind of kept searching for answers, and I didn't even, it just kind of happens. And so luckily I found some answers. So I think I know Starbucks has amazing health insurance and like great benefits. So something to look into if you need a job as a barista. They have amazing benefits. So Starbucks, I know, has fertility coverage, which a lot of women have told me.
Holy crap. Wow. That's amazing to know.
Starbucks. And I was like, I'm all set, but good to know.
I was looking for internships, and I was going through this. I actually did. That was a big factor that I don't talk about when I was, in the professional setting. That's another piece of the shame. You don't talk about whether you want to have kids or your family planning, right? It's like we're in professional mode, so we have to hide that stuff, which I think is silly.
That. I think that they're so annoying that we have to like kind of shush this feminine energy. And I think that it's so annoying that we aren't allowed to be like breastfeeding mothers who also like have careers, when I think that, our feminine energy is such a wonderful tool in our toolkit. And I think it's so often overlooked. And I just think, I don't know, I've just met a lot of idiot men lately. And it's funny, like, when you're like dating somebody and they like can't find anything, or they like kind of just are there's a lot of men that I've dated that are just pretty incompetent. And you're like, how are you doing in the office? Like, how is this going down? Like, is there like somebody there helping you do this? Because I don't understand. I don't know. There's just, it always kind of blows my mind to be like, I don't know. I don't want to shit on men, but like, I'm kind of, maybe I just met some really, I don't know. I've met some bad ones.
Are you dating differently now after egg freezing? Like with this whole fertility journey, you talked about that one ex, but are you thinking about a partner? Are you dating? Like what's the...
So I am not dating. And I mean, I definitely would like to be, but the one thing that's tricky is I'm currently living at home at my mom's house, in the suburbs of outside Boston. So, I'm not really dating right now. And I'm really in super invested in my career and just making as much money as I can right now. I'm just like literally stockpiling as much cash as I can. But for me, after that last relationship, I needed a break. Like I didn't want to even try dating. And someone was like, you need to get back out there. And I was like, bitch, no, I don't. And like, I think that it's okay. I think so many times we're so afraid to be alone. And I think it's so refreshing. And it's just been this time that I've needed to heal because I was in such a terrible relationship. And I was so, I don't know, like he was just the most emotionally abusive, manipulative, narcissistic, awful person. And I'm so, like, I've never been so embarrassed that I've dated somebody in my life. Like, and I'm mortified that I ever dated him. It's like the lowest point of my life. But I really, truly believe that it was supposed to happen. I learned a lot of lessons. And the thing that has been cool is I briefly touched upon like the tip of the iceberg with what happened. And on my Instagram, and it was really cool because I had at least like 7 women reach out to me and say, thank you so much. I left my person because of your story. And I'm like, fuck yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, that was like, the greatest and higher good. Like I keep looking back and like, why did I go back to John? Why did I like go with him? Like I never should have dated him, but it's like, you know what? That had to happen because it's lessons that I had to learn to pay it forward to somebody else and whatever. That's how I try and look at shit because otherwise you're just like, why? I'm like,
no kid.
I'm gonna pay for it. But
well, yeah, it's also part of motherhood or parenthood to want something better for your kids than you experience, right? Like all parents kind of say, like, I want a better life for my kids than I had. And part of that is like what you're noticing that you were with someone like your dad and had that gut feeling of mama bear, like, no, I can't do this to this child, in whatever way. So there's like this gut feeling of like, I got to stop the cycle.
Yeah. And it's just one of those generational curses that just, you have the power to break. And it's like, we all have that power to like, it ends here and it ends now. But a lot of us just kind of stay with it because it's comfortable. And it was definitely hard to like, when I left John, I couldn't even pay for my bag at the airport. I had no money because he took it all. What?
Oh, he stole it. Yeah.
He stole. So I had $30,000 in my account. And then that was like, my money, whatever. And then he was like getting this company up and running. And he like, we were like, and that's the thing. Like I was like in this like a wife and it's like, hey, like, so I was working for his company. And so I wasn't getting paid salary. I was just like investing my energy and my money into this is going to pay off in like 3 months. We'll be super rich. And then, oh man, I could go on and on about women. Keep your own bank account. Have a secret bank account that they don't know about. And I had that. And he found out that I had like a secret, like that I had like money that I wasn't touching. And he was like, we need that money right now. We don't have any money and da da da. And so he was like super frivolous with my money. And, it just was this whole mess. And so he had, we got to the end of the barrel. I was like, John, like, I don't, like, we can't, like, you need to replace this money that you spent. Like, you know what I mean? He took everything. And I had literally nothing. It's so embarrassing because I like being rich. I like having money. I like to buy nice things. I like to treat myself. Like I'm annoying. I like that. And it was really hard to be like, to not only be broke as a joke, but like I was trapped and like I couldn't get out of this relationship because I didn't save that little nest egg for myself. And when it came down to it, I left immediately because he, was threatening violence. He was, doing drugs every day. It was just like a really, really, I started to feel really like it was very dangerous. It felt, I had to like text my sister in an Instagram DM in a photo. So, and have the photo be like disappear because he would go through my phone while I was asleep. Because I was like planning to leave him. And I was like, hey, like I'm getting ready to leave. Like this is like, and it was like so nerve wracking. And I was like, I'm like literally getting like sick to my stomach just talking about it, just thinking back on like the fear that I felt. And there was like one day where he like was waiting for me in the street. I was like driving out of our neighborhood and he was like waiting by the exit in the neighborhood. He's like, come here, I'm going to punch out your windows when you drive by. And I was just like, and I just was like, okay, like it had been like so bad. And there had been so much like, he was psycho jealous and super just like all of these things. And he had had a really hard life. So I kept creating these excuses for him. Like, oh, he, had this happen when he was a kid. And oh, his ex-wife cheated on him. That's why he's super jealous. Let me just show him that he has nothing to worry about. Just run. Just fucking run. No projects. Don't take on any projects. Just like whatever. So he threatened, to punch out the windows of my car and just was overall just an incredibly frightening human being. And would like scream in my face so loud that he'd be like spitting in my face. And like, it was just awful. And like looking back on this is like, girl, like you're so much stronger than that. How were you there? Like, how did I let myself be in that position? And yeah, so it was really uncomfortable. It was really hard because he, he took all my money. I had nothing. And I thought I'd been talking to our friend Becca and I was like, I am not in a good place. I've got to get out of here. And she's like, why don't you come like move to LA? Like I thought he had bugged my car because he knew about LA and my sister's fiance accidentally slipped that I was leaving. Like it was just like a mess. There was a whole like dramatic thing, whatever. But I thought he bugged my car. And I thought he bugged it. Like, first of all, if you think that the person you're with is capable of bugging your car, that's not a healthy relationship to be in. If you think that that's what's going on, you know what I mean? But yeah, so it was really uncomfortable and really hard to leave. I had no money, but you just fucking figure it out. And it's one of those things where like you're scared and you don't know where you're going to go and you don't have any money and you just figure it the fuck out. Just get out. Just like I feel so bad because so many women are trapped. And like, luckily I have my mom's house to come back to. And now I'm working again. And now I have all this money in my bank account and I feel so good to be like back on my feet. But I'm like, I feel like I'm neurotic now with the way that I work because like, I don't ever want to be in a position to like I never want to be there again where I just was and like where you're trapped.
Yeah. Thank God you got out before the baby too.
Thank God. And it was it all like the timing is all so perfect and so beautiful because it's like that sweet little egg and like gave me this fresh perspective to look at this guy and be like, I don't want my kid to go through what I went through. Like my dad was like this. I don't want that. And I definitely I was like, I've seen how this ends. I like have literally, I've got the cheat sheet on this and it doesn't end well for me or the kid. And I always resented my mom because she never left. She didn't leave my dad sooner. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want that. I don't want my kids to resent me. I don't want to put my kids through that. And then I finally was like, also, I don't want to go through that. Like I had this moment actually where I like grieved you know what I mean? We like have this like idea, or at least I do. I have this like dream and vision in my head of like my husband and the life that we have and the respect that he gives to me and just, the love that we share. And I think I had this moment where I grieved a little bit this like dream that I had dreamt up for my life. And then I like looked at the sky and I'm like, oh fuck, I guess this is it. It's never it. Like, you know what I mean? It's never too late. And I know like some people like, you know, will say, hey, you know, you shouldn't be like condoning divorce. I'm a huge believer in divorce. If you're in a bad situation, don't stay for the kids. It's funny because my mom stayed for the kids, and it wasn't until I was a senior in high school and I moved out because my dad, like, he would break shit all the time, and he like punched the glass like coffee table and threw like a glass at me, and not like at me to hit me, but it came way too close to hitting me, and I was just like, no, I'm done. And so I actually left, and I was like, I'm not coming home until like he's gone. And it's funny because it's like my mom stayed for the kids, and I'm like, this is not good for the kids. This is not good. So there's like so much that goes into it, and it's just, I think we overlook so much stuff because we think there's no hope out there. And I haven't met anyone yet that makes me feel like, I'm like, oh, there's the answer. But I truly believe one day I will. And if not, like, I'll just do it myself. Like, fuck that. I don't need anybody else. And they're just, it's cool the way families are made these days. Like there are no rules. Do whatever the fuck you want. I love that.
Well, Caroline, I mean, I'm glad we talked about both of these topics because I didn't expect to. Again, like, fertility is one thing, but I think the decisions it encourages women to make, or the fear that comes along with it. Like, I have now like multiple friends who are in bad situations. I would consider them bad situations because of this fertility issue. And so it's really great to get your insight on surrender and hope, and also what it was like for you growing up with this person that was in your family ostensibly for you.
Right. Totally.
Yeah. And then going through this. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. I'm grateful to be able to share kind of like the thing that's nice about having these cool platforms where people can have their little soapboxes. It's nice. It gives my pain a purpose. It's like, I didn't have to go through this for nothing. I feel like hopefully if, one person hears this and it makes it a little bit easier on them, it kind of makes it feel like this all wasn't for nothing. So thanks for giving me a soapbox to tell my story.
Absolutely. Our very first episode was on finding meaning in suffering, and you really, you do that every time. So
it's the only way to like kind of get through it, I think.
Yeah. Do you have any resources you'd like to share? I mean, we've said Modern Fertility, the Egg Whisperer, anything else that would help, or that's helped you?
So I obviously love Modern Fertility. And so Dr. Amy has a egg freezing party every month. It is a Zoom call. It is typically $60, but if you use code Caroline, I don't like get anything out of that. It just like saves you 50%. But yeah, it's a little class that you can go on, and we do a Zoom meeting, and you can talk to Dr. Amy. And she has a whole like slideshow where she explains, everything that is involved in egg freezing. And it's, an hour-long class. And it's just nice because you can like learn all these things from her, but then you can also follow up and ask her questions and get her, to pick her ear for $30 is such a gift because she is just full of so much wonderful knowledge. And I know Dr. Amy also has a podcast as well. Yeah, she's my go-to for everything. I just kind of like, I run everything by her, and she's like my North Star with all things fertility because she's creative, she's innovative, and she just is an overall badass who is just such a champion for women. So I feel like she's the best place to start. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And we can find you at Caroline Lunny, right? That's your handle? Okay, cool. All right. Well, I can't wait to see you in August.
I can't wait. Synchronize our vaginas. I'll see you in San Diego.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.
All right. Well, I thought that was an awesome conversation. I know Caroline to be a really open, honest, vulnerable person. And I'm just really, really appreciative she came on and told us our story.
Yeah. I mean, she really, I appreciated her being so vulnerable and telling all the different pieces of how hard this is, especially because, we've talked about this before, but healing from loss or tragedy or grieving processes are, and trauma, is really about like finding meaning, right? And there's just, and with all fertility can be, and relationships can be so hard, but becoming a mother is its own meaning, right? Its own lessons, its own like sense of purpose. And it changes the way you view everything, right? You view your body, you view your relationships, you view the values that you're going to impart on your children. So it's really, I'm really appreciative she came on. That was really a wonderful talk.
Yeah. So Kibby, just before we wrap up here, do you want to say, something about the treatment for, well, not that there's no therapeutic treatment for fertility or infertility, but you are working at a fertility clinic. And so what's that been like?
Yeah, I've been working at the women's clinic at New York Presbyterian Hospital. And I mean, anyone struggling with any of these should definitely get therapy. I think that to struggle with this personally, alone without a therapist, I put on a lot of shame on myself. And there was just like a lot of this private struggle, this, especially not a lot of people want to say they're trying to have a baby and are not successful, or they have fertility issues. Like, in order to cut through the shame, going to get help, talking to someone, talking to your friends and a professional would be, it's life-changing. So, I mean, the kind of therapy that we do in this women's clinic is interpersonal psychotherapy. So it's a treatment for depression. And it's a really interesting kind of therapy. It's based on both CBT and psychodynamic and attachment-based orientations, but it's basically a therapy that looks at your role in your relationships, in your life, in your identity during transitions or loss or things like that. So originally, as developed for depression, but it's really, really applicable to fertility, infertility struggles, postpartum, perinatal depression, and mental health, because becoming a mother has so much to do with your role and your social network that it's so helpful. So what it looks like is a lot of processing emotions, like really getting in touch with grief or anger or sadness, things that you might be bottling up or keeping to yourself, and talking a little bit about the changes in your roles or communication or learning how to get the support you need from the people around you, developing and fostering your relationships, and things like that. So interpersonal psychotherapy is super helpful, but any kind of therapy that's particularly emotion-based or would be really, really helpful here. So
that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that, but it makes a lot of sense given, we were talking a lot about what it's like to lose a dream. And women especially are just, it just seems like the arc of our life is almost written out from the time we're born. We play house as kindergartners, preschoolers. And so suddenly having to either shift that role or remove it would be just an immense change and immensely painful. And so it makes a lot of sense to focus on identity in that sense.
Yeah. And losses of expectations and losses of what you thought it would be, or, loss of actual, miscarriages, right? Like actual children, or your dream of a baby. So I definitely recommend that.
Do you have any, especially having gone through this, what's helpful if we have friends who are struggling with infertility? What's helpful? How can we help them?
Yeah, I think that for loved ones of someone struggling with fertility, first of all, talking about it. Caroline was saying this over and over, which I loved, which is opening up, talking about it, not just hiding, that you're going through this, but really sharing with the people around you, and especially other women. For loved ones, I found, this is just my personal experience, I found that the advice giving or practical tips based on their own experience was not helpful. Like, I had so many people say, well, all you need to do is just, have a glass of wine, be in love, sleep with your husband, and then you're pregnant. That's how it worked for me. Or someone else being like, I cut out all caffeine and sugar, and that's how I got pregnant. Right. So it's not helpful, because that's just your experience. That's just one person's experience, and they're trying their best to be helpful, but that may not work for me. And if it doesn't work for me, I feel this extra, like, what's wrong with me? This extra shame. So don't try to jump in with like, this is how I did it, and this is how I think you should change your lifestyle the way I did. That doesn't help. But validating emotions, right? Like really being there and listening to them, asking questions about their experience, asking questions about how they feel, and just giving support, just like being there as a person who loves them. Mm-hmm. That in and of itself is hugely important when you're becoming a mother or anything like that. So just offering that emotional support without the advice giving, I think it's key.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's so often the answer, but I think it's really helpful in this case also just to know what not to say. So, okay. Well, this was great.
I have a book. Yeah.
Oh, you have a book. Kibby has a book.
One book that I found really helpful was The Inpatient Woman's Guide to Getting Pregnant by Jean Twenge. It's written by actually a famous psychologist, researcher, and it just gives like a kind of a practical, accessible account and book about, all the things that go along with this, where like the biological pressure, society and what they say, and social pressures and things like that. So I really recommend that book. So I'll put the link on the website.
Perfect. All righty. Well, thanks again for listening, and we will see you all next week.
By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.